Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming to our webinar, and I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen now. All right. So I'm Michaela. I am the founder and co-owner of GC Prep, and I am struggling today. I'm just going to be totally honest with you. Had a very anxious day. So what we'll do here is I want to go over what it means when we don't match, because this is not a comfortable discussion, right? So if you're here and attending or watching this in the future, it's because you had a bad day on the 17th, right? And it can be laden with a lot of emotions. And it's hard to know how to process that. Like, what is an appropriate way to think about not matching? What does it mean for your future? What does it mean for you as a person, as a potential genetic counselor? Like, how do you move forward from this really difficult time? And that is our goal, right? We started GC Prep so that we could help people going through this process figure out how to do it successfully and how to improve not only their application, but grow as a person so that they can be absolutely sure that genetic counseling is the field that they want to go into and that they're prepared to enter it. So make sure my slides are advancing here. So let's talk about this. Like, what does not matching mean? We'll talk about reasons why someone may not have matched. What should you do now? Where to get help? Is coaching with GC Prep or really any service that can coach you effective? And then some specific next steps to take moving forward. Okay, so what does not matching mean? There are many reasons why people would not match, even highly qualified applicants. So this year, there were
I'm in a Zoom right now. Oh. And then my camera's not on. Yeah.
Okay, there we go. So this year, 1,860 people applied. That's down about 200 or so from the past years over the pandemic. And about 1,033 participated in the match, which means they had interviews, and 613 of them matched. So that number of seats, 613, is up about 25 or so since years before. So overall, that means that approximately 33% of applicants were successful in matching. Last year was 28, the year before that was 26. That changes with time, and there are fluctuations of how many people are applying and how many schools are available to go to and how many seats they have. Okay. Having a hard time advancing. Okay. So what does it mean not to match? All it means is that you're not going to be starting your master's program as a genetic counselor in the fall. The end. Like, that is what not matching means. There should be no other like super deep reading into like cosmically what it means not to match. And it certainly does not mean that you are a failure, that you didn't try hard enough, that they hated you in your interviews. It does not mean that you will never become a genetic counselor. And it does not mean that you don't have what it takes to become a GC. And it does not necessarily mean that you should give up. Okay. So all of these things in like this does not mean category, it's totally normal if some of those thoughts like went through your head. That is like a completely normal reaction to failure that most humans would have when we try hard for something and we really want it and it doesn't work out when we make that effort. So totally normal if those thoughts came into your head at some point. What we want to make sure is that those things don't take over and they're not the predominant thought process that you're dwelling in at this stage. Okay. What you should understand at this point is you are not alone, right? I know it feels that way, especially when we get hard news. like not matching, it's easy to feel very isolated, and it feels like the effort that you put in went to waste. And that is not the case at all. You're not alone in this. There are many other people just like you. And if you need to find that group, there's prospective applicants Reddit that I know you all know about. If you want a little bit more controlled space or something a little bit more personable, like contact us and we will connect you with a smaller group of people who are reapplicants so that you guys can connect with each other and find a smaller space where you can talk to each other about this. Okay. The second takeaway is that with 33% of applicants matching, there's a ton of people in the other 66% that would make excellent genetic counselors, right? And that will make excellent genetic counselors in the next few years. So this is not any type of reflection on your future success at all. This is just how this particular cycle played out. Okay? So how do we balance this? The disappointment, potentially anxiety, and then also the need for resilience here, okay? And this slide is not at all based on like psychology that's been reported in medical journals. This has been my experience working with reapplicants over the last couple of years and hearing about their process and how they managed their feelings. And I've seen them fall into two different groups, okay? And so I want to talk about those two different groups and what to do if you find yourself in the one that is spinning your wheels, okay? So the way to healthily process this is usually there is a period of disappointment and uncertainty that happens immediately after match day, right? It's a dark space and it can feel really grim. There's a lot of negative emotions there. But usually they dwell in that space for, I would say, 3 days to a week and a bit, right? That's kind of been average. And then other emotions come forward that help move themselves through, okay? It could be potentially a little bit of like anger at not matching, or maybe determination, or maybe like defiance of like, I really want to like change this outcome. But basically those additional emotions help them reaffirm their goals of becoming a genetic counselor. And they're also able to reassess like, okay, let me put this rejection in perspective, right? It doesn't mean that I don't have any worth as a human. It's not like a rejection of me as a human being. It just means I don't get to go to school this fall. So they're able to move through that emotional process. They learn from their failure and they actually turn like not matching into like an insightful experience that they can discuss in their interviews next time, or potentially even their paper next time. And they start taking actionable steps to improve. If someone is able to follow that pathway through, it has often led to positive outcomes in the next cycle where they're matching. They grew from it. They expanded their understanding of the human experience and what to do with negative emotions, which is really important for a genetic counselor to understand, because a lot of our patients are going to have a lot of negative emotions. And so if we can take these critical, essentially undesired moments of our life and turn them into greater emotional intelligence and insight, it's going to benefit you as a genetic counselor in the future. Okay. Some people may decide at this point that genetic counseling is not the career for them, right? And that's totally okay, right? If you've gone through this whole process and didn't match, like this is a perfect opportunity to assess, like, am I doubling down on genetic counseling, or am I thinking that maybe somewhere else would be better for me? And there's a massive difference between giving up and leaving in defeat and like dropping this potentially like this dream that you had out of hopelessness versus choosing, well, it's not in the cards for me, or maybe my personality is not a good fit, or it might not be what I was actually shooting for. And so you're coming to this point where I'm moving on from this particular goal in my life, but it's not because of like negative emotions. You're choosing to do this with positive emotions, and there can be closure there. Okay, so that's still a healthy outcome, whether you decide to reapply or not. Okay. Other people, though, I have seen have gotten stuck in that period of disappointment that happens immediately after match day. And they have a really hard time moving into this like mental reframing and the action steps, and they just tend to like wallow. And if we don't address that state quickly and take steps to move you forward, then that can just lead to a lot of anxiety building up. It can lead to a lot of like self-criticism and hopelessness. And eventually that will turn into self-doubt and fear that can come across in your papers and your interviews. So we certainly don't want anything like that. So it's been 2 weeks-ish, like tomorrow's 2 weeks since match day. If you find yourself still in this place where you're still feeling like acutely devastated and you haven't been able to move on or like imagine a future with hope, then this part is for you. We need to get you out of that because it's not healthy for you to stay there, right? And it's not your fault that you're there at all, but we want to make sure that we help you move forward. Okay. People who get stuck in that state often, again, don't match the next time either because they haven't addressed some of these like underlying self-confidence issues that we need to fix before we're applying to grad school again. Okay. And so if you're stuck there, I would highly recommend professional therapy to help you move through it. I've been in therapy personally for like 7 years. It's great. I recommend it to everyone. Okay. There's no shame in doing something like that. And if that's the help that you need to move forward and feel confident in taking the next steps, whether it's toward a future in genetic counseling or a different career, then please do that, right? Our goal is for you to be healthy. Okay, so let's talk about some reasons why someone didn't match, okay? There's a couple here. The first one is maybe you needed more competitive experience, and that's a pretty broad statement, right? So for some people, they need better grades. Those are GPAs of, on average, people who matched and didn't. So on average, people who matched had a 3.66, unmatched had a 3.49. So not super different, but there were higher GPAs among people who matched. Now it's not like you can go back to college and like redo your entire GPA, but if there are specific classes, especially the hard science classes, genetics, chemistry, biology, things like that, where you had lower grades, like what would you say, Janelle? A B or lower? B minus or lower?
Yeah, B minus or lower.
B minus or lower, then you might want to consider retaking those. Okay. Even if that one class doesn't necessarily make a difference in your overall GPA, if a program can see that you have recently gotten a high grade in one of their like your prerequisite science classes, that is going to reflect favorably. Graduate classes in genetic counseling are very challenging, right? Academically, very rigorous. So before a program gives away one of these very precious spots, like that's a rare resource, right? They want to give it to people that they think will be able to keep up academically, right? That's not the only criteria they're looking for, but they want to make sure that people can be successful academically. So if you need to repeat a class or two, now's the perfect time to start looking into that. Okay. It could be that your exposure to genetic counseling, whether that is shadowing or informational interviews, is pretty low. It does kind of stick out to schools when an applicant doesn't have a clear understanding of what genetic counseling is, like in a really realistic and practical way on a day-to-day basis. So if you need to bulk up that part of your CV, then we can work on that. Um, crisis or counseling experience. I would encourage you to find a meaningful venue to do that, right? So crisis text line, totally fine, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes people are able to find a place to do crisis work or that kind of community counseling in a setting that is especially meaningful for them, right? And their background and the things that they are passionate about. And so if you seem light on crisis work, or if you feel like you just didn't get very much out of your crisis experience, I would encourage you to look for a crisis experience that is especially ringing true or especially significant to you personally, because you're going to have an easier time talking about that in your paper and your interviews. Same thing with your advocacy work and volunteering. If you need any additionally relevant training or coursework, sometimes people are missing like a prereq or two. Now is again the time to remedy that. Some schools lean on research more than others. I personally did not have too much research experience when I applied, but that was 12 years ago when I applied. So it's a different ball game now. If you need to spend this this next year, 9 months into research, then there are places like you get a research assistant position. There's places where you can get involved there, or if you're still going to school, then you can get involved in an on-campus lab. Okay. Other reasons, right? So your writing and or interviewing skills need work, okay? This section is actually really critical. And where coaching, whether it's by GC Prep or not, can help you, okay? Your understanding of the field and how you have interpreted your experiences and what you've learned from them is the most precious thing that schools are looking for from you, right? And so if you're having a hard time like explaining that or getting it out in your paper or your interviews, then that could be something that's holding you back, right? So this is, again, where coaching can help the most. So we want to make sure you're able to write and articulate why genetic counseling is specifically the career for you, that you know what genetic counselors do. A lot of the times we see like superficial analyses of experiences, especially in interviews and sometimes papers. And that can really not turn off a program, but it's like you're missing opportunities on the table there. Janelle, do you have any comments on that? Like if you see a superficial analysis or hear one in an interview, like what does that make you think about that particular applicant?
Yeah, most people and my admissions committee were super sensitive, maybe the word, to people's insight and understanding not just what a genetic counselor does, but why they do what they do. And in absence of that, it makes them feel like we're not really sure that this person really understands what genetic counseling is about, and if this is the thing that they really want to do. So it just doesn't look favorable if you're not able to articulate, just like Michaela was saying, your insight, or if it seems pretty superficial. This is especially as someone, if you're thinking of reapplying, or if you've ever held a GCA position, I want to emphasize this because I think the expectation is that people with either of those experiences, the expectation is that you're actually going to have a lot of insight because you have more time and exposure to genetic counseling. So it's just something to consider. But I wanted to just add that as well.
Yep. All true. Agree. Some people have a lack of confidence, even though they have all the things they need and they'd be a great genetic counselor, they just don't believe in themselves. And if you don't believe in you, then how are you going to convince people who don't know you, like the program, to believe in you? So we need to work on confidence for some individuals. And then also the flip side of that, like some people come in super arrogant, right? So confidence is not the same thing as arrogance. They're very different. But all of these things on this slide are what coaching can help you with. Like our job and what I spend most of my time doing with applicants is helping them dig up these things. Like, okay, so you did thing X, but what did that mean to you? What were you thinking? What were you feeling? Why was it relevant? Why do you still remember it? And really getting down into the deep meat of those experiences, because all applicants are going to bring to the table different events that have occurred in their life and different things they've been involved in and different experiences that meet the criteria that schools are asking for. It's not about what you did. It's about what you learned from it, right? Why was it done that way? Was it good or bad? You know, like how did that affect you and how you see the world? That is what schools are looking for. And so a lot of what we do at GC Prep is making sure that the paper you're writing and the answers you're giving in interviews are able to clearly communicate why these things were highly relevant and important to you in your life. Couple other reasons. It could be that your letters of recommendation were lukewarm, right? Like if your grades are pretty good and you wrote a decent paper, but you applied to a bunch and only got a couple of interviews, then it could be that your letters of recommendation were not very strong. And so we can't help with letters of recommendation, right? That's a conflict of interest. But we can talk about how to make sure that the people you're asking for them can truly recommend you and truly give their kind of like stamp of approval that you'd be a great person to have in a genetic counseling program. And so if you need to, you might think about your recommenders and think, okay, are there any of these people that I don't feel confident about the letter they wrote for me, whether it was just vague because they don't know you very well, or if you don't think someone could actually be like 2 thumbs way up, make sure this person's in your program. Okay. Another reason is some people are not specifically passionate about genetic counseling. It's fairly common for people to apply to genetic counseling school and multiple other graduate programs at the same time. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. But if GC is just like a nice option that would like work well for you, then that hits a little bit differently in your paper and in interviews than someone who's like, yeah, GC ride or die. Like it's got to be this. So if you're not like totally gung-ho for genetic counseling, then that is a place where you can reflect. Like, is this for me? Do I feel super passionate about it? Because this is not a field for people who are like, oh yeah, I could get into that. That would be fine. Like, no, you really have to be dedicated because being a genetic counselor, there's a lot of emotional weight because of the counseling that we do. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of things going on that, in my opinion, we're not super fairly compensated for, right? No one's getting rich doing genetic counseling. So it needs a lot of passion and a lot of dedication to know that this is where you belong and where you would thrive. Okay? And then for some people, their personality just might not be a good fit for genetic counseling. And it doesn't mean that anything is wrong with them or wrong with their personality. It just might not be one that really lends itself well to being a genetic counselor. So you can consider a couple of these things, like, do you like talking to strangers, right? Are you reasonably friendly? Are you comfortable being in charge or being the authority in the room? Do others rely on you and trust your judgment, right? Can you stand up for someone who needs it, even if it's at risk to yourself, right? So those are some questions that I think are really important to reflect on. For me personally, like that first one, do I like talking to strangers? At a party? No, right? Small talk is intimidating for me. I don't particularly like that. But if I'm the one that's kind of like leading the discussion and I know what it's going to be about, like this webinar or like a genetic counseling session where I know what I'm doing in there, that becomes a lot easier for me to talk to strangers, right? And so that is an okay profile, right? So these are not like hard yes or no questions. They're just things for you to reflect on. I've had a few people come through or want to be a genetic counselor, but they're extremely introverted and are like really uncomfortable around other people. And I'm not sure it's a great fit, right? Not that they don't have what it takes intellectually to be a genetic counselor, and they could work in a non-patient facing role, but any role as a genetic counselor, even if it doesn't work directly with patients, you're still going to be interacting a lot with other medical providers and your colleagues. It's a very collaborative and social field. And so if that is not something that you're comfortable with or like thrive in those type of connections with your personality, it might not be the best place for you. And if that's the case, that's okay. That's not a failure to realize that your personality might not be a good fit, right? And it certainly doesn't mean you have to leave genetics. There are a lot of other degrees and related fields that you can get into and still be involved in genetics. That would be a better fit for someone who has a personality that doesn't want to socialize a bunch. Okay. Okay, so what do you do now, right? Deciding not to reapply is not a failure, right? We don't want you to decide not to apply because we're running away or scared of rejection. Like that's totally different than someone like maturely assessing if this pass might not be right for them, right? So if that is a decision that you're still in the middle of, reflect on that. Feel free to talk to us if you want to bounce things off of us and we can kind of share our thoughts. But do your best to assess yourself objectively. And objectively means without self-criticism, right? Where you're weighing your strengths and weaknesses and you're weighing your just like who you are as a person without any good or bad values, just as is this a good fit? So if you decide to reapply, here are the next steps, right? First, self-care. So realign yourself with your goals, give yourself grace to go through everything that you're feeling. Do the things that make you the happiest, be around the people that make you feel most like yourself and your happiness, okay? Decide if you're reapplying, about that, and then ask for feedback from the programs where you applied, but we're not doing that right now, okay? Right now, programs are getting ready to graduate their second years. They're doing other stuff related to match day. It's just a really busy time for programs. So the best time to reach out to the programs you apply to for feedback is actually the end of May or early June. They have a little bit more bandwidth. And if they have more bandwidth, then they can be more specific and detailed when they get back to you. And that will be more helpful to you than them trying to shoot off some like brief email to you now to get it off their plate, right? If you've already sent them, that's okay, right? It's not the end of the world. But if you haven't sent those emails yet, end of May, early June, it's kind of the best time to do that. In this next couple of months and before you apply again, we want to beef up our CV experiences. And we'll talk about a little bit more about that in the next few slides. So explore, network. I hated that word. That word is still like uncomfortable to me. It just seems really intimidating, but it just means like get to know more people, ask for connections. So again, anytime you talk to a genetic counselor for like an informational interview, ask if they have a colleague or a friend or a classmate who would be willing to do an informational interview with you. Like ask for any opportunities. We often don't get what we don't ask for, and you never know what you will get if you do raise your voice and ask for something like an opportunity. And so I encourage you to do that. We want to connect the dots. And what I mean by that is we want to connect what you've learned about genetic counseling as a profession, what genetic counselors do, why they do it, how they do it. We want to connect that knowledge with what you've learned and experienced in your like crisis work and your volunteer work and your shadowing and all of that. We want to connect those dots so that you can explain to programs, well, this happened to me, and even though it's a completely not genetics related event, I can see how the skills I used in this situation would apply in a genetic counseling setting. Like that is the type of information programs are looking for from you. So we want to spend these next couple of months really integrating all of that knowledge together so that it's very workable for you. Building your confidence, right? Totally normal if your confidence took a hit on match day. And that's a totally normal response. But we want to make sure that we're rebuilding your confidence as a person, that that experience is not being ignored, but it's holding only an appropriate size space in your memory and your feelings and not taking over everything. And that you can still recognize all of your strengths and the value you have as both as a person and as an applicant. And then be proactive, setting goals, right? And some of that involves getting personalized help or coaching. Again, GC Prep does that, but other places do as well. It's really helpful just to have someone guide you along that process and be someone that you can check in regularly to make sure you're on the right track. Because the schools honestly don't give a whole lot of information on how to be successful on their websites and in their like informational meetings. And so having a mentor or a coach or someone who's supporting you through this process can make sure that you don't feel like you're floundering in uncertainty the whole time. Okay. So now let's talk about where we get help. Okay. Here are some non-GC prep options. Okay. So for interviewing skills, like Toastmasters actually is really good for helping people who have a hard time with like public speaking or in a pressure setting like interviews. Your university's career service might have something similar. If you need to retake classes, there are a lot of remote offerings. Stanford has a certificate in genetics and genomics if you want like a multi-class kind of certificate to put on your CV. And that's especially good for people who've been out of school for a little while. Their GPA from college is not that stellar, but they really want to prove that they can do these hard classes. So something like a certificate can be helpful. Tulane University offers a one-year master's in medical genetics and genomics. And so that can be something to do in the interim. You don't have to do those things, okay? You're not expected to do them. But for some people, getting a certificate or that 1 year's master's can be really beneficial. For other people, maybe just repeating a class or two individually can be helpful. Okay. For confidence, therapy or life coaching, we talked a little bit about that before. And then for genetic counseling exposures, lots of options. There's the GC Career Fair that's hosted each year. NSGC has a special interest group for applicants. There's all the online resources that you guys already know about for prospective students. Program open houses, definitely listen to the DNA Today podcast. All these different options. Sometimes testing companies like GeneDx and others will have webinars that you can join. Anything to beef up your CV, all of that can go on your CV. It's all relevant and shows you're participating and shows you're dedicated to this, that you're spending time thinking about it, right? So get involved there. There's also a new, it's called a GC Immersive, and it's at Color Genetics. I don't have the link for that now, but I think you could probably find it on their website. And I do have that program coordinator's email that you're welcome to email me for after this. But it's basically like a 4-week, it's not a course, but like experience, right? That you can do remotely. And it's like shadowing and genetic counseling exposure, but they're not coaching. So it's not application help, but it can help the people who are like, I'm having a really hard time finding shadowing. No one's getting back to me on being able to have me shadow in their clinic. Color is making an opportunity for people to do that. Okay. So if that is something like a place in your CV that is a little weak, definitely look into it on Color's website, or you can email me and I can give you their contact person's name. Okay. This is a new program, and again, goes into that CV building. So Southern California University of Health Science is opening a new GC program in the fall. It is totally remote and mostly asynchronous, so really good for people who are either like changing careers or have a geographical restriction, or, you know, there's lots of reasons why someone might go for a remote program. But their focus is on how to integrate genetic counseling with a whole lot of other allied health professions. And so they're trying to take like a holistic approach to the training of new genetic counseling students. So they have a prospective student information session on the 13th of May. It's at 10 a.m. Pacific, that's 1 Eastern. And you can RSVP to the program director's email. Her name is Stephanie Gandomi, email address right there. You can also talk to her directly for like 30 minutes, and that can be, again, information on the program or just an informational interview to bulk up your CV. I've talked with her. She's encouraging that. She wants to speak to you. So there's her Calendly link. Again, feel free to email me for that if you want that, but that's an easy add to your CV. Okay, so I wouldn't miss that opportunity. Okay, let's keep talking about where to get help. These are resources at GC Prep that are free. Okay, so we do book clubs. There's usually 3 or 4 of them a year, and they're hosted by our genetic counselors and sometimes a program director. We also have 4 webinars a year. This is one. We'll do another one that's kind of an orientation to the whole application process and what you should be doing when. That'll be in September. And then one on writing your statement of purpose, probably towards the end of October. And then usually one on interviewing towards the end of January. We also offer support groups, including a reapplicant support group, which I personally think is the most underutilized resource at GC Prep. But it's making sure that you're feeling not alone, that you're getting peer support, that you're helping others as well. And it's moderated by one of our own genetic counselors. So if you have a question that you want like a genetic counselor to answer and not a whole pool of 2,000 other prospective applicants who may or may not know what they are saying is accurate or not, then this support group can be really helpful. That's usually on the second Mondays of each month. Okay. We also have a program map. So that is free. And it's a map of all of the schools in North America, so US and Canada, and it's filterable. So you can decide like, well, I want a program that's under 10 students and I want to pay less than this many dollars and I want it to be in this part of the country. And you can apply those filters and it's going to bring up all of the schools that would be relevant there. And so you can filter schools and make decisions about which ones you want to investigate more, where you want to apply beyond just starting with location. So you can find places that maybe you hadn't considered the last time around. Okay, that's on our website. And then we have the educational videos. So those are actually free to underrepresented applicants who complete our demographic survey. So underrepresented would be a minority ethnic group, a person in a low socioeconomic state, or people in the LGBTQIA+ community. So there's a financial aid tab on our website, and at the bottom there's a demographic survey. You can fill that out. Most people who do usually qualify for some degree of access to the videos. And so that's a great way to do that. For people who are not in one of those underrepresented groups, the DNA Today podcast has a discount code for our videos. And so if you go and find the DNA Today podcasts that were done with GC Prep, you can find that discount code and get a reduced price for those educational videos. Okay. This is a busy slide. I apologize, but this is our offering for like actual coaching. Okay. This is where a lot of the difference is made for people who use GC Prep and are trying to match. We're going to look at the numbers on how effective this all is in the next slide. But this is where we see the most growth and most improvement is when people engage in these services. So there's a couple options for group coaching. last year was the first year that we did an application boot camp, which is like a 6-week intensive with 4 applicants. You meet once a week to discuss topics relevant to applying, how to build your confidence, working on your CV, starting to write your paper, interacting with each other. And you also once a week, as a group, will interview either a genetic counselor or a patient or the mother of a patient, right, to build your CV experiences. So you get to add like up to 6 informational interviews and experiences to your CV. We've got a couple different sessions of that. It starts in June. It's really great for people who learn as a group and like as collaborators and really like to talk it out. Perfect for people who want that setting and who really need guidance, right? They're like, I don't want to have to do this alone. I want someone to show me the steps and the path forward. Boot camp's great for that. Okay. On the one-on-one coaching side, of course, we do document reviews and mock interviews. We also do what we call a limited series, which just means multiple document reviews or mock interviews at once. Usually it's 3 or more. That's the most common service that people select. And that's where we're seeing the most growth and improvement, is when we have multiple sessions to really work on your particular needs, your paper, so that we can see you, who you are as a person coming through the materials that you're providing to the program. We also have some interview simulations that will happen in the spring, right? It's really meant to simulate the day of, so 3 30-minute interviews back to back with their coaches. And then we also have long-term mentorship. Long-term mentorship is for people who want holistic help. So yes, I want document reviews and help with my applications, and I want all of that, but I know I need tools to build my confidence, or I really am having a hard time identifying what my strengths are, or I really need a cheerleader, someone who I can interview midweek and be like, hey, I was thinking about this, like, what do you think about it? And so a long-term mentorship really provides that holistic coaching and guiding and mentorship that goes beyond just specific application help and really helps you grow as a person. So for some people, that is really what's going to help them grow the fastest. Okay. If you are confused by any of this, fair, that's a lot of information. If you're not sure where you should start, you can book, we call it a limited series orientation or a long-term mentorship orientation. That's with me. It's totally free. And we just meet to talk about who you are, what you need, what kind of coaching would be best for you, right? And just to point you in a direction that would be most efficacious for your preparation. Okay. So does this all work? Because applying to schools is really expensive. And so if you're going to be spending money on coaching to help you match, then it sure as hell better be worth it, right? And we think it is. And here's why. So the red is the national statistics in various categories. And the blue is what we saw with GC Prep. And the match service this time was really specific. They provided good data. So all of these stats are confirmed. So overall, let me see if I can find a little pointer. I don't know if I have one. But if we look here on the left-hand side of overall matching, the national match 3%. Overall, users of Prep that did some type of coaching service matched at 67%. Okay, so double pretty much. Okay. When it comes to interviewing nationally, 55.5% of people who applied got interviews. But for people who used GC Prep in the fall and had any type of coaching before they actually submit their application materials, almost 84% of those got interviews. Okay. And if we look at people who matched after their interviews, so 59% of people who had interviews ended up matching. If we look at that for people who prepared for their interviews using GC Prep, 72.5%. Okay, so in all of these categories, coaching helped a lot. These are really significant changes to someone's likelihood of matching. And we're really proud of this, right? This is what we were hoping so that we can help qualified and prepared applicants make sure they stand out and are getting noticed by schools. Other data points to consider, that application bootcamp we talked about, last year, 90% of people who did it matched. And that was in the fall, but 90% of them matched. If someone had coaching in the fall, 65% of them matched. And that they didn't necessarily have any interview prep, okay? That's just, did it help them if they submitted documents that had extra coaching and help with them, okay? People who only had access to our videos and they had no coaching at all, still matched at 50% compared to that national 33%. Or if someone had only 1 or 2 small groups, again, no specific one-on-one coaching, still matched at 56%. Again, that is significantly better than the national 33% rate. So does it work? Absolutely it does. Yep, absolutely it does. There are also other intangibles to consider, like anxiety management and critical thinking skills that are improving, and your insight that's getting deeper. It's going to reduce your confusion and floundering of how to be successful at this. And you're going to get realistic and specific encouragement that's relevant to you, right? And so some of those things, that cheerleading, right, and the emotional holding, right, and balancing that you can get from a coach or a mentor can make this whole process a lot less stressful, especially when you know what's coming if you're doing it again than trying to go it on your own. Okay. Before we move on, any questions on this slide? Nope. Okay. So here's some testimonials from last time. We're kind of running out of time, so I'm not gonna get too deep into it, but both of these individuals were reapplicants and were great, right? They had like certain holes in their CVs that made it difficult for them the first couple of times. And then they used GC Prep to prepare and they matched, right? So we can help you address these spaces and holes so that you're really coming with everything on the table and really putting your best foot forward. Okay. So what are your next steps? These are my recommendations, right? So take it or leave it, but I recommend becoming a site member at GC Prep. You'll receive our notification emails for events and sometimes discounts and just what's coming up, right? I recommend signing up for the free reapplicant support group. It's once a month. So again, you're not feeling like you have to do it alone. Access those educational videos. So again, free for people of underrepresented groups. And you can apply with that demographic survey on the financial aid tab. And then you're always welcome to contact us to help make a plan. So you can book one of the orientation sessions. It's on our website on book services and recurrent mentorship. Those are free. And we'll just talk about what you need and what your concerns are and how to best move forward with those. They're not at all an obligation to use our services. So it's just a good way to touch base with someone who knows how to help you, essentially. And here we are. Any questions? Any thoughts? I know this is kind of, it's a group, right? And you're strangers with each other, but anyone just want to talk about their experience on match day or the things that they're concerned about? And while people think about that, we had a question. At what point do you recommend starting with the GC Prep tools? Great question. Earlier the better, right? What we've seen, not just this year, but in past years as well, is the sooner someone engages and starts getting direction in how to deepen their insight, how to start thinking like a genetic counselor, they're building that muscle. And so even though we might be talking about that in the context of, well, let's make sure your paper is really insightful and highly relevant, the same kind of critical thinking skills and deep insight and reflection is used in your interviewing as well. So I recommend not waiting until like the week before Thanksgiving to ask for a series of document reviews. Some people do that and we accommodate them. But the earlier you can start getting help and start thinking like a genetic counselor and how to really dig into that, then the easier it's going to become and the more practice you're going to have. And the better and more prepared you're going to seem, right? Did that answer your question? Yes, it did. Okay, perfect. Other questions or concerns? Nope. Okay. So we are always available. My email, support@gcprepllc.com. That goes directly to me. I answer those. Ask for help. Don't try to do it alone. It's not, you guys know this, applying is not a very fun process, right? But it doesn't have to be done without assistance, and we can help you, right? Even if you end up not using any of the paid services at GC Prep, totally fine. Engage with the map. And usually in August is when we update that map, and it's a lot of work. So last year, and we'll probably be doing this again, we kind of outsourced that. And so applicants could look into a couple of schools for us in exchange for a free small group. So we'll probably do that again towards the end of the summer. So be on the lookout for an email from us that lets you know that that is an opportunity to sign up and be part of that effort if you want to get some free coaching that way. But those orientation sessions, again, free, no commitment is needed in those sessions at all, but it's a great place to help give you like a starting point or like point you in the right direction of how you're going to move forward. Okay. Janelle, do you have anything to add?
This was great. No, I think you covered all of the major points. And so hopefully folks will have a better sense as to like what the next steps are for them. And I agree about the reaching out. It's never too late. I'm never too early to reach out and get some support.
Okay. So we'll call it there for tonight. And thank you guys so much. Take care.